Greetings folks and welcome back to the Electromaker Show. This is your midweek roundup of all things maker, embedded tech and lovely. I was ill last week, hence having no show, so this week we have a bumper show full of projects and products to get through, so let's get going. This week we're going to start the show by looking at a few products and things that you can support on funding websites, and we are beginning with the Pi Boy Dmg. Now there's lots of handheld retro gaming consoles around, but this one seems pretty special. It's based around the Raspberry Pi 4, although you can also use the Raspberry Pi 3B or even the Pi Zero with it. And it seems to tick all the right boxes. It's got a full color IPS screen, a long-lasting 4,500 milliamp hour LiPo battery, and the case looks fantastic. In terms of controls, there's a D-pad as well as a thumbstick and 6 buttons. Well, 8 buttons if you include the start and select buttons. Now, as always, ETA Prime has got a video out on this and it is fantastic and comprehensive, so I won't go into all of the details, he will cover them perfectly, and I will leave a link to both the Experimental Pi and ETA Prime's video in the description of this video. But yeah, look at it. This really does look like a Game Boy. It's great. It actually reminds me, it's the first handheld that really actually reminds me of the feel of a chunky old school Game Boy, and I love it. It's a really nice design, and I'm really excited to get one of these. So the Pi Boy Dmg is available for pre-order from Experimental Pi for $119.95. And yeah, it's a full kit. You get everything that you need. There is some assembly required, and just one little thing, it's only a small touch, but there's a cooling fan for the Pi. So they really are going for performance here, and it's all included in the kit. And I feel for $119, that's pretty fair actually. That's a pretty good price. So as I say, it's on pre-order right now. For the first time in some time, I am very tempted to actually get a retro gaming handheld console, and I think this will probably be the one. So at some point in the future on the show, we will feature it again, and I will have it in my hands to show you. Up next, an update from Pine64. Now, I'm quite a fan of what Pine64 do. They've put out a range of affordable laptops and a tablet and the PinePhone, all Linux-based, all open-sourced hardware. And especially the phone is kind of interesting because there are very little in the way of usable open-source hardware out there for smartphones. And the community edition of the post-market OS PinePhone looks very interesting indeed, and they have just announced that they're going to be releasing a convergence package, I believe it's called. Yeah, that's right, community edition post-market OS with convergence package, limited edition Linux smartphone. Now this is super cool because it's a Linux smartphone to begin with, and we're very much behind that. That's fantastic, and a completely open source phone sounds like a lovely idea. But the convergence package comes with a special dongle which essentially allows you to turn it into a usable computer. So as you can see, this will probably be somewhat familiar to some of you if you've actually tried to use your smartphone as a kind of quasi-desktop computer before. What it is a little breakout module with a display port, a couple of USB ports, and a power port along with an Ethernet port, which allows you to attach screen, keyboard, mouse, and yeah, essentially use your PinePhone as a small Linux computer. Now, as the name implies, this product has been designed around post-market OS, which is something I won't go into the entirety of the details of right now, but it is a very exciting project. It's probably the most exciting open-sourced operating system for mobile phones that's going at the minute. If you want to check it out, postmarketos.org is their website, and that is what Pine64 are basing this package and phone around. So as well as the idea behind this being quite nice, it's pretty cheap as well. The convergence package is $199.99 for pre-order, and it is only in pre-order right now. You can't get your hands on one of these right away. But it looks pretty good and actually pretty chunky. They've updated the phone in order to get the best out of the operating system. So now you get 3 GB of RAM, and you also get 32 GB of eMMC flash storage. And yes, okay, this isn't going to be going toe-to-toe with flagship smartphones, but that isn't really the point here. This is a great project, and I'm seriously considering, when it is time for me to get a new phone, trying out something like this, because I've always sort of stuck to mid to high-end Android phones, and as someone who is a user of all operating systems for various different things, I do have a great love for Linux and open source, and I would like to try and support a project like this at some point. So if that sounds like something that might interest you as well, there'll be a link to this project in the description, and of course the store page, so you can pre-order it if you'd like to. So onto a product that isn't available for funding. It isn't even available to pre-order yet, but this is something so cool that I wanted to talk about it straight away. So what you are seeing here is a Raspberry Pi Zero up top, and below it is an ATMegaZero. Now this is a project from 4Hacker in Atlanta, Georgia, and this is a Raspberry Pi Zero form factor board using the same ATmega32U4 chip as the Arduino Leonardo and Micro. This is a really awesome idea. I couldn't even imagine how he thought of this, and yet now I'm looking at it, it just is such a fantastic idea, because doing it this way means that you don't just have your Arduino board. We've seen in previous shows that you can make the boards with the same chips absolutely minuscule if you want. This is going in the opposite direction. This is an Arduino board, but it has an SD card slot fitted onto it already. It has a header port for an ESP8266 module and a port for a camera. I realise now I got that wrong. It isn't a camera port, it's an OLED display port. And I did know that, and I still said it wrong. So yes, as you can see here, this is, it looks like a Raspberry Pi Zero, but it's going to be Arduino compatible. And there's many reasons why you might want that. For a start, having a fully functional USB HID compliant device which already has an OLED display port and an SD card slot on it would be a very useful way of having a sort of slightly higher functional plug-in and play drive, where you could have files, you could have software that ran off it, and this is all stuff that you could do with a Pi Zero, but in my opinion using Pi Zero as USB devices has always been a little bit overkill despite how cheap they are. And the fact that the GPIO pins are more or less compliant with Raspberry Pi, he says he's made it as close to the GPIO pins on the Pi as possible, means there's a high possibility that certain hats and things designed for the Pi Zero will also work with this board. So as I mentioned, this thing is nowhere near production yet. These are pre-production tests that he's running on them. As soon as this thing is available to either fund or buy, I will be letting you know about it. Because as I've mentioned before, there are smaller USB HID compliant devices out there. There are a massive plethora of different Arduino compatible boards out there, but this is something quite special and creative. And ideas like this are worth our support. So as always, I will be definitely getting my hands on one of these when they come out. And as soon as I know where to get them, I'll let you know where you can too. Emit by Controlbits is an environmental monitoring sensor board, and again we've covered these in the show before. There's a lot of them around, but this one I thought was quite elegant and quite nice in the way that it was put together. As you can see, it uses the ESP32 board, and it has a header for it, which means that technically you could have several different ESP32 boards that you program and just plug and play as you go. The board comes with a temperature and humidity sensor along with a relay for controlling higher voltage things and a micro SD card socket as well, along with an expansion header with 12 pins and some user programmable LEDs. Another thing I like about this project is that there's obviously been a bit of thought put into it in terms of making it fit into your home. A lot of DIY boards and projects and things that you can work with they're great and they work fantastic, but to have them actually put into your home, you would have to make an enclosure for them, and you'd have to make that enclosure good enough to fit with the rest of the furnishing in your house. Now, if you're a DIY person like me and you have an attic of dreams to fill with horrible things, that's no problem. But as he says here, he wanted to make something that looked nice enough for his wife to let him put it on the wall, and that's what he's done. As you can see, this box here looks like the cover for any plug or sensor that you would find in a normal home. Another nice touch to point out here is that this board is Python compatible. You can use MicroPython with it, and as they mention in the crowd supply here, Python is the language that many people turn to when they're using data, and of course this is a data logging tool. So Emit has only just begun its funding journey, and it's only raised $500 out of its $3,500 goal. However, it's not that expensive, especially if you already own an ESP32 dev kit. It's based around the Do-It ESP32 boards, which are fairly inexpensive, and you could get one of those separately. And if you did already own one, then the board costs only $29. However, if you just wanted to get the whole package, including the ESP board, it's $59. But either way round, no matter how you look at it, that's pretty cheap for what it is. And if you're looking for a good environmental monitoring sensor for your home, this might be a good place to start. Now next is a campaign on crowd supply that has yet to launch. It's not able to be funded yet, but it is incredibly exciting. And again, this is a wallet warrior because you don't know how much it's going to cost, but I'm pretty certain I'm going to have to back this one. Lta Headphones are a modular open hardware framework for high-end headphones. Now what this means is that you can essentially change the configuration of your headphones in both hardware and software as you go. This essentially means that if you ever bought a very nice pair of headphones, only to discover that while they are nice headphones, they just don't quite work for you. And remember, every set of ears is absolutely unique. That's why you have these very, very fancy headphones these days that scan the inside of your ears and decide what kind of sound quality you should have. But these are everything that hits every box for me as a maker who's into sound and music. It is a kit that I can build for the one part of it that I've never really had a kit that I could build before. Sure, I've built my own speakers before, and they've never been as good as main speakers because I've just bought the bits and put it together. And realistically, for home monitors and things like that, unless you're going to go very high end, you make them and you're kind of stuck with what you make once you've made them. That does not seem to be what they are doing here. Everything is fully customizable, everything is replaceable, and everything can be changed. I really like the idea of this. And yeah, there's not much to go on apart from this page right here. There is a lot of information you can read through, and I say you really should go and read through this because there's so much thought that's gone into it. But for now, all I'm saying is when this goes live, I'll be talking about it again, I'll be supporting it. And even if they don't get this project 100% correct, this is what I want to see more of. I love the idea of this. I love the idea of a completely open and modular hardware thing that is completely your own. And if you get it, you put it together, you try it and it doesn't quite work, you can just replace bits until it does. It's just such a nice idea. Just before moving on, I realized I said hardware and software, and instead of recording the whole thing again, no, there's no software here to change. This is a modular hardware. I don't know where I got the idea of software from, but yes, regardless, modular hardware, open source, lovely. Up next, a proof of concept, self-driving, well, bin. Yeah, this project by Jason Look is a six-wheeled robot which has a camera on the front which senses its surroundings and takes whatever is put in the top of it to the bin. So as you can see right now, it's lining itself up, and it takes a second to do so, but yeah, this is again just a lovely idea. This is a project that ticks a lot of boxes for a lot of people, I think, because one of the main problems with getting into the DIY robotics and all this kind of stuff is that you don't necessarily make things that are functional, that do things that are useful. Whereas, as far as I can tell, this is already something that I would use. Like, if I could just drop something in this in the living room and just say, off you go, yeah, I'd be absolutely down for this. Yes, this it uses a Raspberry Pi inside, and what the camera is doing is tracking a little bit of fabric or paint or something which is on the bin. Now, I'll leave a link to this in the description of the video, and you can check out Jason Look's channel, which has a lot more details on this, along with other projects. And if you are interested in doing something like yourself, the detections code that he's using for the camera is available on his GitHub, which I will also leave a link to as well. And finally, before moving on, the game Diablo 2 has a very special place in the heart of a lot of people. It came out at exactly the right time for me. In the year 2000 when it came out, I was 15 years old, and I had never seen anything like it. I didn't actually play the first Diablo. It was Diablo 2 that got me into the series in the first place. And now you can play Diablo 2 on a Raspberry Pi 4. Now, this is using Open Diablo 2. If you're not familiar, this is a project which is essentially an open source version of Diablo 2 that you can compile yourself. But the fact that they've got it running on a Raspberry Pi 4 is just fantastic, and this is something that I'm going to have to try for myself because yeah, I love the game, and I really hope it plays the same way that it does. That I have very fond memories. It's been quite a long time since I played it, actually. So if you are interested in this, I'll leave a link to the Reddit thread. Not that there's that much information on it, but there is a link to the Open Diablo 2 GitHub. And you can look through there. It has a fairly good set of instructions. And so if you are completely new to building it, you know, building something from source and all this kind of stuff, you should find that you don't have any problems. And yeah, once again, at some point, I'm sure you will probably see in the background, I'm going to make sure there'll be a little screen somewhere with a Diablo 2 playing on loop on a Raspberry Pi, just because that's probably what I'm going to do as soon as I finish recording this episode. And now it is time for our weekly mystery box competition. Now, if you haven't seen this before, we have a mystery box full of things. Some of them are fantastic embedded devices that you can program on and develop on. Some of them are hats for different devices, and some of them might be completely useless things. I have no idea what all of the things in this box actually are. So that's how it works. If you want to enter this competition, you just have to leave a comment on the video. It doesn't matter what the comment says, and let's choose a prize for this week. So, as always, I have my protective plastic bag here to make sure that I'm making it fair. And I'm just going to sort of dig down the front of the box today and get a box from the box. And the box is containing a... Oh! Okay, this is the Intel Galileo board. Now, if you're not familiar with these things are absolutely lovely. And one of the very few boards that I've never actually owned. Now, no, the Intel Galileo, for those of you that aren't familiar, is an Arduino compatible board based on Intel architecture. I'll get it out just quickly and we'll have a very quick look at it. So this is it. Now, I don't know how well you'll be able to see it just through the camera, but essentially this is, as I mentioned, it's an Arduino board based on Intel architecture. So as you can see, it has an Ethernet port there for connectivity. One of the things that's really cool about this is it has a mini PCI slot, you can see just there, which means that anything that you'd plug into a normal PCI slot, you can plug into this board, like Wi-Fi modules, all that kind of stuff. As you can see on the front just here, it has a fairly familiar set of header pins, and that's because it is designed to be compatible with Arduino headers. So any Arduino Uno R3 headers will work with this board. These things are lovely. As I say, I've never had the chance to play with one. This board comes with a micro SD port with a micro SD card in it. I'm not sure if there's anything flashed on it already, as I guess the prize winner will find everything about it. Yeah, these boards are really, really lovely things. I was excited about them way back when they first came out, and this is really cool. But yeah, as always, we have the prize, but now we need the prize winner. And the winner of the mystery box competition is Rgb. Rgb, I hope I'm pronouncing your name right. This Intel Galileo will be making its way out to you. We'll be in touch with you to find out where you live and to get it out in the post. So yes, that's been the mystery box competition for this week. Leave a comment on the video if you would like to take part in the competition next week. But for now, let's get back to the show. And now, very briefly, I just want to talk about a news story from this week. I'm not going to go into the details of it, partially because a lot of it goes way over my head, and again, because if it's something that you are interested in, there's plenty of resources you can read up on it. But this is something that was reported in The Independent, that machines can now learn at the speed of light after a breakthrough in AI. Now, the main reason I wanted to mention this is just because the tagline is so cool. That one of the people said, I mean, obviously they're subquoting them here slightly, but when opportunely trained, the platforms can be used for performing inference at the speed of light, which just sounds so incredibly cool. The idea of AI performing inference at the speed of light. As I have said, this is stuff that's a little bit above my head. I've talked in the past about how I have dabbled with machine learning. I've done a little bit of doing it on both the Raspberry Pi and on my main computer, and I've done a course in machine learning as well. And even after all of that, I still feel like I'm very much just pattering around in the shallow end of a very, very deep pool. But for those of you that are interested in this, I'll leave a link to the news story in the description, along with the actual paper in Applied Physics Reviews for you to read through. It's quite a dense text. Obviously, this is a research paper, but it is absolutely fascinating, and it's something that I hope at some point in my life I have the time to really delve into and learn more about. So, onto a section called Projects from the Week and some from the week before. So as well as not having names for things, I'm starting to sing. What's wrong with me? So this project from Reddit user Skeknir on the Arduino subreddit has created a Pavlovian math skills training machine for his children, and it is a wonderful beast. It uses a LCD screen and a touchpad, as you can see, and essentially what you have to do is answer maths questions correctly in order to get some sweets. And it is a lovely design. It is fully boxed up and ready to go, and it seems like it's been designed rather well in that you have to answer the question, you enter your answer, and if you get it right you get some sweets, but there is a timeout, meaning that you can't just keep pressing the buttons and pressing the buttons. It has been well thought out, and as a parent of a very small child, yeah, I think this is a very cool idea. It's nice, it really is, and it's very prescient that they decided to put a lock on it to make sure that they couldn't just keep going and keep going, because there's only a certain amount of maths questions you can answer before the sugar rush hits and you can't do anything anymore except run around screaming. So while there isn't a how-to or anything for this project, the video does show the innards of it in terms of how it works, and it is relatively simple. It's an Arduino with a servo and a screen, and of course the touchpad on the front. The coding is something that is actually a good thing to try and do. We're so used to finding code that other people have put together in order to make our projects, but this is a fantastic coding project. It's fairly simple, it's just basic arithmetic and a little bit of timing, and if you are interested in making something like this yourself, I'd say that whether you use the suites or not, a simple maths game for Arduino is a fantastic beginner project for anyone. So if you're looking for something to do with your Arduino starter kit, I'd suggest maybe looking into that. Staying with Reddit, but this time the Raspberry Pi subreddit, user Vovik-Pluck1 has made a drawing machine using 2 old DVD drives. Now this is using a Raspberry Pi Zero and the stepper motors in both of the drives in order to create essentially sort of like a miniature version of how a CNC machine works. Although obviously, as you can see here, there's just a pen attached to a servo allowing the pen to move up and down, and you can draw pretty intricate things with it. Now the thing I love about this project is it's the exact thing that I got into DIY electronics for. And when I first started with Arduinos and things like that, I wasn't actually all that bothered about the Arduinos themselves. The thing I loved about them is that I could just rip apart old stereos or old printers and use the things that were already in them. Now, unlike the project that I talked about just before, this one does have a how-to and a very, very well documented GitHub, which shows how it was put together and how you can build your own. And again, this is one of those projects where you do need to buy a few things, but they're all relatively cheap things you can get from AliExpress. And the CD drives is the kind of thing you'll probably be able to find locally, I should imagine. There's so many old computers with DVR drives. And I don't know about you, but I haven't even used a CD drive on any of my computers for a couple of years now. I know I have at least 2 in the basement, and again, this is something that when I have the time, I'd love to try and make. The project is based on a post on the Fun of DIY blog from 2013, which uses a Raspberry Pi again with DVR drives again, but this time uses the laser from the DVR drive to make a mini laser engraver. So this is a much more in-depth tutorial because essentially the tutorial that I just showed you before with the pen engraver uses a lot of the open sourced code from this project. And I would absolutely suggest reading through both of them. I'll put a link to all 3 of these in the description of the video, although if you only go to one of them, if you end up here at the Reddit site, you can go to the GitHub, and from the GitHub you can go to the blog post here, so it's all linked together. And it is a fascinating read, and it is, again, exactly what I got into this for. It's repurposing old things, using modern technology in order to make awesome, cool stuff. Up next, a Raspberry Pi spotted in the wild helping people with their software for brewing beer, which is something that is very close to my heart. Now what this is a New Orleans based group called Aleproof. Now they are creating software which is designed to help you with the brewing process. Now, there's many things to take into account when brewing your own drinks. I don't know if anyone has ever tried to do it who watches this show. I've tried in the past, but it was always very simple, incredibly beginner level stuff. And as soon as you start reading into it, you realize that like most hobbies, you can go very deep. And the professionals have to know some very important things like yeast cell counts and gravity and a lot of things that I never even got to. But this program is designed to help you actually work out when brewing is completed. So you might wonder where the Raspberry Pi fits into all of this. Well, at this stage, they're just using a Raspberry Pi for testing because they have a place called the Danger Shed, which is a fantastic name for a shed. It's where they are testing their software out by brewing their own beer there in the shed and taking readings and details from it and doing it right now manually. They're taking all the readings that they need in order to see how the beer is done. This is the bit you can tell that I'm not so familiar with. But however they're taking those readings, they are putting them on paper and then putting that into the software in order to check it, calibrate it, and to get it perfect for use. If you are interested in brewing and you'd like to know what Aleproof are up to, I'll leave a link to their website as well. And there's a lot of interesting stuff on here to do with creating a gravity curve in Excel for your beer and how to do a yeast cell count, which is something that I didn't even know existed, I'm not going to lie, until I was doing a little bit more reading up about this. This is something that I'd like to spend a bit more time reading about, and I can sort of see maybe, again, I'm speaking completely hypothetically here, that if they're already making a piece of software that works with the Raspberry Pi and that they're taking readings in order to see if the beer is brewed, then surely there's a few magical steps in the middle there which, instead of using a person to see the yeast count, couldn't you get a computer to do that? And couldn't you plug a TPU into the Raspberry Pi and get machine learning magic to do that? Because what I'm saying is if someday someone starts selling a piece of software that I can plug into a Raspberry Pi and then just put some stuff in the corner and it'll make beer for me, sold, mine, straight away. Just show me where do I give the money? How did I throw money at the camera until it comes to my house? That's yes. So a link to the Raspberry Pi blog and the blog post will be in the description, along with a link to AleProof. And I've also noticed there's a few home brewing Pi kits in the related post. So if it is something you're interested in, it's definitely something you'll have time to do some reading on. And now a project on the Electromaker site from Mukesh Sankla, which is a weather simulating desk plant. So this project uses a Node MCU along with some addressable LEDs to create a reactive plant pot, which you can obviously put a plant into, but will also change depending on the weather. So to get the weather data, he is using Open Weather Map, which is a free API allowing you to get weather data from the internet for any location. Once you've got that weather data, you're free to do what you want with it. And in the case of this project, it changes the color of the cloud, it changes the color of the pot, and there are different effects for rain and for sun and for daytime, and for evening. So the project uses the Node MCU, which is an ESP8266 board, which means that it's completely wireless. And again, this is just another example of a very nice functional project. The case is 3D printed, and the 3D printing files are provided in the instruction here, and along with the circuit connection and how to put it together. And this is a very stylish project, and it's been put together very well. And it wasn't until I had read through this in order to prepare to talk about it for this week's episode that I realized that this is, oh, there's me again, that's weird, that this is the same person that we highlighted a few weeks ago who made the Rgb Hexamatrix Clock. So Mukesh Sankla, you are a very busy guy, and these are fantastic projects. Again, if you do have a Node MCU and you do have the LED strips, you don't necessarily have to print up this particular pot in order to do it. You could make it out of anything. This is, again, another very good beginner project, both in terms of putting together LED strips and learning how to use them, and working with APIs and learning how to get data from the internet to use in your project. And finally this week, an internet-controlled bubble machine from 8 Bits and a Byte. Now, 8 Bits and a Byte are a fantastic YouTube channel who've made lots of stuff. I've been following them for quite some time, and they've published this project on the Electromaker website using a simple electronic bubble machine. There's lots of variations of these. I have one that looks like a woodpecker. I think it's a woodpecker. You just put a single battery into, and you put some bubble mixture in, and it'll just keep firing bubbles out until you run out of bubble mixture or battery power. They have taken the same idea and used a battery-powered frog bubble machine and a relay along with a Raspberry Pi in order to make an internet-controlled bubble machine. Now, the idea behind this project is actually quite simple, and its simplicity is what makes it so cool. Again, for beginners, learning how to use a Raspberry Pi and a relay together is a very important thing. That's essentially the beginnings of making anything in your life automated. Anything that you plug into the wall, of course, be very, very careful and make sure you know what you're doing if you're using high voltage, but theoretically, instead of going straight into the wall, it can go through a relay, and then you can turn it on and off via the internet. And that is what's happening here, although instead of high voltage, it's just plugging straight into the battery pack of the bubble machine and then setting it off by commands over the internet. One thing that makes this project super cool though is, as well as being able to control it across your local network or anything, they've opened it out to the internet so that you can control it. And by that I mean that they're using Remo. Now Remo.tv is a sort of combination of a streaming platform and server, and I haven't used it much, but it kind of reminds me a little bit of what you would get if you combine Discord and Twitch or something. I might be speaking completely out of school because I'm very new to it. But essentially they're using a Raspberry Pi camera, and they're attaching that camera to the Raspberry Pi, of course, and then they're streaming it to Remo. But when you're in the Remo stream, you will notice that you have an option here, which is to bubble. And when you click the word bubble, it should start bubbling. There it goes! Okay, I shouldn't be getting this much fun out of this. I understand that that's way too much fun. But yes, this is wherever 8 Bits and a Byte are based. I don't actually know. And when I click the word bubble on the internet, it fires out a little stream of bubbles for me. Isn't that nice? So as I mentioned before, this is a project from 8 Bits and a Byte, and they are a fantastic YouTube channel. I've been following them for quite some time, and they just have a whole load of really nice projects. And again, like I've said many times before, one of the things that they do is make functional things, or at least if they're not functional, they're kind of pretty, or they're funny, or they all have a reason. And I am someone who is very guilty of just having a bunch of stuff on breadboards all over the table. I get it working and then I'm done. Whereas they make things. They are absolutely makers. They are absolutely worth your support. And I would say go to their channel and subscribe to it if you haven't already. So that's it for this week. Thanks so much for tuning in. If you're enjoying the show, please do give us a like and leave a comment on this video if you'd like to enter the mystery box competition. We'll be back for you next week, but for now, stay healthy, stay creative, and have a great week.